The member for Orange.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to make a brief contribution in relation to the Victims' Rights and Victims of Crime Commissioner Bill that's before the House this evening, and indicate I'll be supporting the bill. This is a bill, Madam Speaker, which I'm very interested in for a number of reasons. Not that long ago, I presented a petition to this House in relation to the tragic death of a young girl that lived in my electorate, Biddy Porter, and the dealings that family had not only during the court processes, but the subsequent dealings they've had with the Mental Health Review Tribunal. And I'll get to that more in my contribution a little bit later. But this is an area, as I said, particularly interested in, and I commend the government for honouring their commitment before the election and honouring their commitment of delivering this commissioner an independent statutory position, officer, that isn't subject to ministerial direction, control or authority, and someone who can really closely monitor not only the Charter of Victims' Rights, but how victims are being dealt with in many other ways during often a difficult time during court processes and during tribunal hearings. The independent statutory position, as I said, is important. I know there's currently a commissioner who looks after victims' rights, but this bill differentiates. This position will allow further powers for that position to be able to investigate, request documents to be produced, and make recommendations to government. Now, I note it complements the Victims' Right and Support Act bill or legislation, and the Victims' Services, which is an authority looking after victims at the moment. The Charter of Victims' Rights, which has been discussed many times in this debate so far, pertains to all victims of crime and outlines a framework as to how they should be treated and assisted in New South Wales. And there's 18 odd points, and I'll just briefly touch on them because I think it's important to know this. Respect, information about services and remedies, access to services, information about investigation of the crime, information about the prosecution of an accused, information about trial processes and roles as witnesses, protection from contact with the accused, protection of identity of victim, attendance at preliminary hearings, return of property held by the state, protection from the accused, information about special bail conditions, information about outcomes of bail applications, victim impact statements, information about impending release, escape or eligibility for absence from custody, submissions on parole and eligibility for absences from custody of serious offenders, financial assistance for victims in personal violence, and information about complaint procedures where a charter is breached. So that will now be incorporated as part of the responsibilities and areas that the new Commissioner will no doubt be looking into in relation to victims dealing with government agencies, especially. But as I said earlier, that the issue I really want to focus on in my contribution is how victims are treated when matters get to the Mental Health Review Tribunal. Only yesterday I was talking to a couple who are going through this as well, following the murder of their son, where the murderer was found not guilty after a hearing by special verdict, and has been an inpatient now at a forensic institution. And to be quite frank, from the many families I've spoken to in the last couple of years following my involvement with the Biddy Porter matter, many families have come forward to me from outside my electorate, but they've seen me as someone who's prepared to roll up my sleeves and speak on behalf of victims, obviously with my own background in my previous career. But I've heard stories as to the way victims have been treated at these mental health review tribunals. In essence, they aren't given much of an opportunity to have their say. They have to submit their written submissions in advance. They can't raise issues during meetings or reviews, I should say, which are conducted every 6 months, where the victim needs to relive these experiences every 6 months at these tribunal hearings. It is just, I would say, almost lip service that victims are afforded an opportunity to have some level of input at these tribunal hearings. And these tribunal hearings are dealing with cases of homicide, in many cases domestic homicide, but not all cases, but where they've lost a partner, a child, a loved one to a gruesome murder. And once it gets to the Mental Health Review Tribunal, it's almost just tokenistic that they're allowed to be involved, but they're not really afforded an opportunity to have any great say in those proceedings. So I do hope that this legislation will empower the Commissioner to really delve deeply into how victims are treated and the family of victims at mental health review tribunals, because I feel, personally, the pendulum has swung so far in favour of the perpetrators at these tribunal hearings that the wishes of the victims and the wishes of the community are just disregarded. And that, in my view, is grossly inadequate and doesn't reflect community expectations in relation to these types of serious offences. So I don't wish to talk too long. I just wanted to make a brief contribution in relation to supporting the bill, obviously. But like I said, I do hope that the new Commissioner, whoever it is, he or she may be, has a really deep dive into the Mental Health Review Tribunal and speak to victims, because I'm sure there are plenty who would be prepared to give some information to whoever that new person is in relation to their experiences and their problems they've faced when dealing with the tribunal. Other than that, I commend the bill to the House.